And Professor Eddy Maloka, visiting adjunct professor at the Wits School of Governance and CEO of the African Peer Review Mechanism, joins us now from Wilmington in the United States of America to speak about this. A very good evening to you, Professor Maloka. Really appreciate the time. Good to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
So I need to solicit your views first about this. As you know, there's a great deal of agitation in South Africa about the presence of African migrants, and I'll clearly put it as that. We've seen what happened recently in Diepsloot. There were protests, violent protests, people have been killed. And I want to just hear from you your thoughts about this Afrophobia and the tensions in our communities. Have they spurned campaigns and operations such as Operation Tutula, which we now hear is spreading to other parts of the country?
No, I think it's a worrying trend, but it's not unexpected, because when a country is in a state that we find ourselves in at the moment, you find all sorts of movements, populist and extremist movements. It's not only this attack on foreigners. Remember that there's also the rise in different forms of ethno-nationalism and also racial nationalism. So whether we have foreign nationals or African foreign nationals in South Africa or not, I can tell you that we will still be fighting against each other, because we are in a crisis. We are moving in circles and we don't seem to find a solution. So we're pointing fingers at each other. And of course, we'll always point at the other. You can't point at yourself. So if there's no foreign national, they will be pointing, it will be ethnicity, it will be you are the Boer, you are... Really, this is the reflection of the crisis that our country is in at the moment. We don't seem to have a solution.
It's interesting that you should say that, Professor Maloka, because there are those who get not only even agitated but dismissive at what they see as these academic discussions around this, saying that we are ignoring the lived experience of those in communities who have to contend with crime due to criminal elements from migrant communities, these drug dens which are often attributed to Nigerian nationals. There have been videos in support of the anger in South Africa, in Kenya, that are saying, you know, this problem of foreigners who come and live in our communities who don't abide by the rules is what has led us to this point. Is the foreigner, as you call them, a political bogeyman, as you've used, or are there real problems here of the state's failure? Go ahead.
The foreigner doesn't cause your problems. You have a problem, the foreigner will reflect that problem. Because if you go to, there are countries where you have foreigners. You go to China yourself. There's quite, especially in Guangzhou, quite a lot of international migrants who live there. Some are even selling in the streets of Guangzhou. Why you don't have, they don't do in China what they do in South Africa? It's not this inverted logic that they do in South Africa what they don't do in their own countries. It's for me, it's just a reflection of the crisis that we have at the moment in terms of our own creativity and thinking, and the courage also to admit that the problems that we identify with migrant communities and also in South Africa, but also in the poor areas, and so a reflection of the problems that we have in the country. There is no way that the migrants can be a cause of unemployment in South Africa, can be a cause of crime in South Africa. They can only reflect the state of our country in those particular areas. Perhaps they can exacerbate, but the problem that's what I've always argued, that if migrants get into a country, which is the state of our country at the moment, where there's almost in certain areas collapse at local government level, government has packed and left certain areas, and they get in there, there's no governance, there's nothing. What do you expect them to do? They'll take advantage of that space. So the problem is in our local areas, there is no government.
Okay.
There is no government. Government has collapsed in local government in a number of areas across the country. We have seen cities, inner cities, collapse. degenerate. They can't even pick up waste in the Johannesburg city center over the last few years. So you don't blame migrants for that. Those are a reflection of the problems that we have, that we need to go back to the drawing board and look at the state of governance, at national, of course, but at local government as well, because that's where the problem is. The state has left.
Okay, so then let's look at those areas that led you to, and I know in the article I'm conflating some of what you're saying when you were saying that the multiple crises in South Africa, and we continue along this trajectory over the next 20 years, we run the risk of being a failed state, and therefore it is time now for a second republic. Perhaps expand a little bit on what has caused this collapse, what is at the center of it, and why is a second republic the answer?
Well, it's a number of factors. One, of course, is the crisis within the ruling party. The ruling party has an organizational model that is unable to help the ruling party solve its own problems, you see. And then it has taken this crisis, which is essentially a crisis within the ANC, and exported it into society. And the ruling party gives us leaders, and it gives us leaders through its internal democratic processes. But these internal democratic processes are not competitive and are based largely on patronage. So it works when you have a lot of these people in abundance within the party. But then when you have a situation where a lot of people have been pushed out of the party, you have all these new people, and it's a different caliber of cadres, you could say, of the party. And then they are taking leadership position across society. Then you must expect that there will be, this will be reflected in the state of governance in our own country. So the problems that we have emanates from the problem within the ruling party. It's not a problem that South Africans have caused themselves. It's a problem that has been caused to South African society by the ruling party.
So let's
expand. The ruling party is unable. Yes.
A little bit more on the leadership aspect, because poor leadership was cited as being part of the problem, as we mentioned. You said there are three types of leadership responses: the captain of the ship, the ego, and Madiba's mojo. What are the salient differences, and what is there a particular type that we need now to get us out of this crisis?
No, the third type of leadership typology. The ones who will be able to think outside the box and take the country out of the current crisis. So we are moving in circles because we don't want to deal with the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is that we have a leadership. The ruling party gives us the leadership. For example, the ruling party has its own system. It has provinces, regions, and it also have national, and it has branches. So those who are elected into leadership in the branches, they become councillors. Those who are elected into leadership in the region, they become our mayors. Then the province also come. They don't come from South African. They come from leadership elections within the party.
Okay.
So whoever becomes a chairperson. So the point I'm trying to make is that we get leadership generated through the ruling party's internal democratic processes. And that process now is no longer giving us the best. And this is reflected in the kind of leadership that we have. Then we have people who are not ready, and we have big cities, like I've made this point before, big cities that are given to very young, inexperienced colleagues to run, to lead. So you will have a problem.
So
you will have a problem, and that's for me, I think, the question of leadership. So what we need the leadership of the Madiba's mojo. So those are the people who will be able, instead of investing in differences and saying this is the foreigner, this, we need leaders who will take us out of this crisis and say, look, we need to
Professor
think outside
Maloka,
the box. We must do away with this. We must do away with it.
Do we have such leadership at the moment? And
we
are
have
they
it
listening?
in abundance. We have it.
Okay, are they listening to some of the suggestions that you're making? And most importantly, the national question. Diversity management is something that you said is important to inculcate into the national question when we're dealing with the tensions between South African citizens and African migrants. How would that kind of leadership then, play that out?
Just to take this example, the one that you've just cited, you have a country, they see migrants are coming and they are in demand, they are all flowing to South Africa, they love South Africa for whatever reason. So other leaders, the Madiba type of leaders, they will see this as an opportunity. They say, let's turn our country into a capital for Africa. Let's take advantage of this massive flow of people coming our way. The same thing that Dubai has done. That's the origin of Singapore, the modern Singapore. When people are coming to you, they are not a threat to you. You should not be mobilizing your own police force, army. You won't be able to, because it is a preferred destination for international migrants. But the Madiba's Mojo leader will say, this is an advantage. How do we convert this massive number of people coming our way into a resource for the development of our country? And I think it's a challenge, but I think we seem to be looking for short term with shortcuts and thinking that investing in difference, mobilizing against them is not a solution, because you're not going to stop them. They are coming here. South Africa is a preferred destination, probably the most preferred destination in Africa. And this is a resource, it's an advantage, it's not a curse.
No, it's such a pity. I had hoped we had more time, Professor Maloka, but much appreciated. Professor Maloka has pointed out that mass deportation is not an answer. He's also said that we need an integrated policy that does not confuse the phenomenon of the foreigner with immigration issues. And he's also said, looking at the vestiges of the new regime post-apartheid that we're left with, that need to be looked at, could be some of the solutions that we should look at as a country. Professor Eddy Maloka, visiting professor at the Wits School of Governance and the African Peer Review Mechanism CEO, speaking to us from Wilmington in the United States of America.